My name is Kelsey Erickson-Stroifert. I am our Chief Public Affairs Officer. We have Emily with us today, our President and CEO, and then Erica, our Advocacy Manager, is running all things tech behind the scenes. This is not our traditional webinar. We can see you, we can hear you when you're not on mute. So just be cognizant of that if you would, stay muted when you're not talking. Maybe try to minimize the, phone moving about in the background. But we set it up to be a meeting so that we can really hear from y'all, and this can be interactive because the whole goal of this session really is to get your feedback as our members so that we can make sure that our session agenda really reflects the real world challenges and opportunities that y'all are experiencing every day. So, Emily, do you want to kick us off a little bit and I'll get our PowerPoint started in the meantime?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So just returned last night from a conference in Florida with a lot of the leaders across the space and was able to share what we shared with all of you around 80-20-30 and our partnership with the Law Center and the NRA. And it's just a reminder to all of us, if you take advantage of the tip credit, this was a disastrous rule for you. And the fact that we were able to partner and wipe it out for everyone in the nation, we had a lot to celebrate. But it is just a reminder that this stuff really matters. It's the most important work that we do. And we have great events and great parties, and that's all fun. But we have a lot of people counting on us, especially at the 89th. And so what I ask from you all is please, as we go through this, if you have ideas, suggestions, if there's a massive pain point, like you can't get a drive-through in, Kelsey and I know we just met with a major group, like what else are those things that we need to be on the radar to see if it's something that fits into this agenda? So don't be shy. But I think Kelsey's already done a lot of work on the survey and other things to give you a great look at where we think we're headed for this session. But your vote and your voice counts a lot. So please add to the discussion.
Awesome. Can everyone see that single slide?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. We will get started. So just some quick housekeeping items. First, thank you for joining us. It really is important that we hear from you. And so thank you for being here. I know y'all are all so busy. Just a reminder, this is a confidential conversation. We have not decided as an organization what our priorities are or will not be. And so please do not go share the content of this discussion. This is also closed to media and off the record. It's just for our members. As y'all know, we can't give legal advice. I'm a lawyer, so I always have to say that. And we will make a recording of this presentation available to any of our TRA members. So if you miss part of it, if you want someone on your team to watch it, that sort of thing, that's certainly an option. And then most importantly, as we said, please engage with us as we go. We want this to be interactive. So first and foremost, I like to just kind of start off with what are we dealing with? How do these legislative sessions work? So Texas is unique. We only have a regular legislative session in every odd numbered year, and they only last 140 days per our Texas Constitution. They cannot go any longer than that. So it is a sprint, not a marathon. I almost said that the reverse, but it is a fast and furious sprint, and we really have to go into session with our priorities ready, with our allies knowledgeable and with us and ready to hit the ground running. The only constitutional requirement for our legislative session is that our lawmakers pass a budget for the state for the next 2 years. In theory, they could come in, do that, go home and pass not a single other item, and they have done their job. And I say that to really show that our sessions are designed to slow down legislation, to be deliberative, not really to pass legislation. That's sort of the unique case. Who are we dealing with? Governor, lieutenant governor. He's really more of a legislative role in Texas. He oversees the entire Senate, is incredibly powerful. Then we have the speaker who leads the House, 31 senators and 150 representatives, including the speaker. Little known fact, Texas senators actually represent more people than US congresspersons. So they have incredibly large districts and really a lot of influence over our policy in Texas. There's some key dates for you. Probably the most important thing there is that legislators can start filing their legislation, this November, right after the election. So again, we just really have to hit the ground running. Really quick, how to read a bill. So underlined language would be things that would be added to the law. Language in strike through and brackets would be deleted. And then you can see there's kind of other pieces of the bill that we look at as well. In case you're wondering, this is part of our alcohol to go law that I like to use as an example for good, I don't know, good juju or something. Lots of resources are available to help the public track what's going on in our legislative session. So first and foremost, your resource is us, right? Me, Erica, Emily. If you ever have a question, please don't hesitate to ask. But I also want you to know there's resources you can use to follow along. TLO stands for Texas Legislature Online. That's that website that you see here. You can look up bills, you can look up votes, you can watch committee hearings. Lots of information is available to you there. Twitter is also a great resource. I shared some of the kind of main hashtags and people you might want to follow if you're just interested in this sort of thing. And then who represents me, you can use that website, put in any address, so your personal home, a business, anything like that, and it will tell you all of the folks who represent you. So your state representatives as well as your federal. So that can be a great resource. um, I love to show this slide because, again, it just shows how difficult it is to actually pass a bill in session. So if you look at the very top here, filed, that stat, that tells you that 19% of the bills that are filed actually make it into law. So you can kind of see each of these are a step that has to be cleared. So, for example, a bill that passes one chamber of the House, you might think, that's great, we're halfway there. Well, only half of the bills that make it to that stage actually make it through the final process, right? So there's lots of steps at every stage. Things can and do go wrong. And so that's why most of the bills that are introduced don't actually become law, which is good for us, frankly. So how did we do last session? Hopefully you already know this, but again, just kind of shows context and scale. Over 8,500 bills and resolutions were filed last session. I look at every single one, believe it or not. It is painful. I don't recommend it. But you really have to look at everything because a bill that sounds like it might have nothing to do with restaurants could impact us in some way, right? And so it's really important that we have eyes and ears on everything that's going on. Last session, only 16% of the bills passed, so an even lower percentage than normal. Governor Abbott set a record by vetoing 76 of those bills. And again, 140 days, really, they only work about 70 of those. The beginning of session is basically ceremonial. They take weekends off, they take holidays off. So we're really talking about 70 working days. We had a great session last year, and again, just kind of shows you the scale of the operation that we're running during this time. So that's all context. That's all what we're dealing with. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of what should we be focusing on this session, knowing that we have a really short runway and narrow opportunity to get things done. So as y'all hopefully know, we've been doing a advocacy survey. And that survey is still open. So that's why I have on here results so far, because these might change. But here's what our members have so far ranked as the top challenges from biggest challenge to smallest challenge. So not shockingly, labor costs are the number one, and right behind it are food and other supply costs. So what we're hearing from y'all is everything's expensive, and that's putting a real pinch on margins. Number three was credit card swipe fees. Interestingly, that used to be number one. So I'm curious to see as we get more responses in how these fluctuate a little bit. But again, we're talking about a major cost that's hurting your bottom line, right? Number four is hiring and retaining workers. That's pretty much always one of our top challenges. Five is finding and affording business insurance. Was not surprised to see that. It's something that I'm hearing more and more from our members. Either companies are dropping their coverage altogether, or it's becoming really expensive to afford. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. You can see the rest of them there. Again, nothing really shocks me, but I think it's always helpful to see a ranked system because we know there are lots of challenges, but what are the biggest challenges that we need to tackle? Okay. Another sort of survey result so far. I asked y'all to sort of rank which policy changes would be the most beneficial to you. And the number one result so far is more credit card competition. Second is protecting the tip credit. Third is more consistency and communication regarding health inspection rules. That's another thing we're hearing about more and more. Four is stopping common restaurant charges from being classified as junk fees. That's something we're watching very closely at the federal level, but we could also see state efforts to classify fees as junk fees. Five is fewer permits required. I think that speaks to not only cost, but also just the time and frustration that it takes to figure out what permits you need and pull the paperwork together and get all that sorted. And then you can see kind of the rest of them on that page. So before I move on, because I think next we start talking about priorities. Yeah. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions just about questions or comments on the feedback that we're getting so far in that survey.
And Kelsey, could you define number 9?
Yes. Is that Dan? I think I recognize your voice, Dan.
Thanks.
Outlawing reservation pirates. This is a new thing that we're seeing. It's an advent of technology. So the state of New York, I think they actually passed a law on this, but the idea is that people are using AI and other technology to go into either third-party reservation websites like OpenTable, or even going to the restaurant website directly. They're scooping up all of the reservation options and then they're selling them to the public for some kind of cost. So it's almost like a ticket scalper if you think about it that way. So New York, I believe, actually tried to outlaw it. You know, it's one of those things that is probably a little hard to outlaw because it's an evolving technology, but that's the concept.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or feedback? Anything that you think is kind of missing or surprising from these results?
No, I mean, I think all of these, this is Skeeter. I think all of these things are super important. And congratulations on the 80-20-30 rule. That you guys did a great job on that. So on the overtime rules with, paying overtime with salaried employees, and I think I know the answer to this, but, we're monitoring this. We have a couple of managers that, are on the cusp. And so, this last time, some of them there's a single mother, she enhances her income by waiting tables when she's not managing. And so, that piece of it, she's not performing any overtime work with management. Her hours aren't over on that. But when she waits tables, that's what throws her into overtime, and which is an issue. And, the hard thing is that I hate to take her off of that. She's trying to make extra money, but that is included in her overtime and her salaried pay. Is that correct?
I think so. I would want to talk to a lawyer to confirm, Skeeter. But you're right to flag it. We definitely need to make sure you're doing that correctly and you don't get caught.
Well, we're paying her overtime, and I know the answer anytime they're working, and whether they're hourly or salary. It's just, that's a problem, and it's really going to be a problem when it rolls over into this in January 1. We're going to have a whole slew of managers that are going to be, on the cusp. And so anyway.
Well, and Skeeter, maybe Kelsey can give you just a quick update, because as you know, that's another one of our lawsuits. So
yeah, I know. I'm banking on it.
There's actually a filing in that lawsuit due today. So we are in an expedited filing schedule, which is exactly what we asked for because of that January 1 threshold that you mentioned, Skeeter. So we are seeking relief before that new change goes into effect. The courts, we can't ever predict with certainty, but this judge has already ruled that the rule is illegal. And so we have a lot of reasons to be confident that we will get that rule stopped before January 1. And certainly that is our goal, and we will keep everyone updated as soon as we have an update on that. But very much involved in that litigation and doing everything we can to get it stopped before January 1.
Okay, thanks.
I'm hoping we'll be 3 for 3 on our major lawsuits this year, which would be a great accomplishment. All right, so let's keep moving here. So what are we doing? We took all these results, we took all our conversations we've been having with our members, with our board, and that's where we really start to shape what our priorities might look like. I put defense first because that's probably the most important thing that we do in our advocacy work, right? Is stopping bad policies from passing or fixing them before they pass. Lots of things on here. I won't read through all of these. I think tip credit is probably the most important. But along with that, there's always attempts to change how or if you can do tip pooling, if you can deduct credit card fees from tips that are left on a credit card. We talked about the junk fee issue. I put swipe fee restrictions on here because that was something we had to deal with last session. Basically, the credit card companies and the banks essentially retaliated against us for some of our efforts, in my opinion, and tried to make it harder for businesses to pass on a swipe fee to their customers. We know that's not something everyone is doing, but we believe very strongly that as a business, you should be able to set your own pricing policy. And as long as it's communicated transparently to the customer, government shouldn't be in the business of telling you you can't charge certain fees, right? That's not a road we want to go down. Lots of other things on here. Bring your wine is something many of you are familiar with. The author of that legislation has moved on to Congress. So I am hopeful that we won't have to spend as much time and capital on that issue. But of course, it's on here because it's something that we'll continue to defend against if we need to. Anything missing from this list? Any feedback on this list? It's long. There's probably other issues as well, but wanted to give you a sense of just how many things we do have to fight back against every session. And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of political bandwidth, but it is a really critical part of what we do.
Just quickly, when I was at the governor's mansion, it came up that, and this really doesn't affect Texas restaurants, but it affects me, so I have skin in the game. But they're talking about bringing back the bill to have liquor stores open on Sundays, and that's a killer for me in New Mexico. So, have y'all heard anything about that, or?
There's always efforts to do that. Thankfully, most liquor stores are against that idea, and the Liquor Store Association is very much against that idea. For them, it's an issue of it just increased their costs because of, they have to operate a 7th day and they're not going to sell any more product. It's just going to be spread over the 7 days. I don't think that's changed. It will be filed. There will be people who support it, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that the outcome will be different this time around.
Okay, great. I just want to be able to sell Garrison Brothers on Sunday. So that's the deal. So
anything else in terms of defense?
no.
What are the specifics on the E-Verify? Just a quick, if you don't mind, just a quick.
Yeah, last session, there was an effort to require all private businesses to run their prospective employees through E-Verify.
Got it.
Our position historically has been that it's the government's job to decide who is in this country legally and not legally, who's allowed to work and not, and we shouldn't push that burden onto private businesses.
Kelsey, just back on the Sunday sales of liquor. It's kind of a double-edged sword for me because my second busiest day of my week is going to be Sunday, and I'm not allowed to sell alcohol on Sundays to tourists who come in from Georgia or Atlanta or wherever. And so for us, that's a real issue for our distillery. We really want Sunday sales. We're not a liquor store. We're a tourism operation. So just wanted you to have the heads up on that.
Yep, that's totally fair, Dan. And I think most folks distinguish between a liquor store and a destination distillery like what you operate.
Everyone does, but the Texas legislature.
Reason doesn't always abound in that building.
Maybe we can throw them a bone and let you guys sell at at your on-site place, but please don't open the liquor stores on Sunday.
Jessica, did you have your hand up? Did I see that?
Yes, thank you, Kelsey. Kelsey, a lot of these priorities look familiar that we've been discussing the last couple of years. Are they on the docket because we just still need more influence and regulation? Is there nothing new in the works that also needs to be discussed? And I'm assuming that that's what the conversation today is about.
There's always, I shouldn't say always, I wouldn't say there's nothing new. There's always people try new strategies, new ways to get at these same ideas. And so we have to stay vigilant and be ready for new angles on these topics, if that makes sense. And really, I just want y'all to know this is the universe of issues that we're fighting against, because as we turn on our next slide to the things that we're going to be fighting for, I think it's important that you know we have to split time, for lack of a better word, right? So we can't spend all of our time trying to change things offensively, because we always have to make sure that we're holding the line on defense and not letting things get worse, if that makes sense. I use a lot of sport analogies in the advocacy work. So offense and defense, blocking and tackle, all that good stuff. Okay, so as we start moving into what are we for? What are we trying to get changed this session? I like to think about things in terms of themes. So one theme that comes up to me is we want to help restaurants save money, right? We talked about the top challenges are all cost, cost, cost. So how can we use government policy to help y'all save money? Swipe fee relief is kind of the first major idea in that bucket. We're working on some language that would really promote competition within the credit card market. And we're also talking about, are there ways to improve transparency in that space? That's feedback I've received from many of you. The good news on this front is we are not alone in this fight. We are creating a coalition with pretty much every type of Main Street business that you can think of. We talked about liquor stores earlier. This is one where liquor stores and restaurants have the same problem and can work together on this issue. They're great partners in this. Retail, hotels, right? Y'all can think about all the places where you use a credit card as a consumer. They're dealing with this exact same problem. We are being very careful with what we share about this strategy right now, because as you can imagine, we don't want to tip our hand and our strategy to our opposition. So please be incredibly careful about what you say on this point, but do want to flag that that is something that's certainly on our radar as a proactive priority. The other thing is reducing the cost and burden of local permits. You can see we've got lots of ideas under this bullet point. I think we'll be able to have, much like last session, one bill, that combines several ideas that will help you save money on your permits. I'm going to go through a few of these a little quickly just so we have time for discussion. The next theme that I see emerging is strengthening the workforce, right? So y'all know that childcare has been a major focus for us. And for me, what I'm really looking at is how can we create tools and solutions that will actually make sense for local restaurants and other small businesses. All of the conversations that I've entered before I've entered them have been geared towards large businesses, manufacturing facilities, hospitals, right? You can think about the major employer centers. That's great, but they're already the best position to address this issue for their workforce. We're leaving out the 99% of businesses in Texas that are small businesses, and that's not okay. So I think we're playing a really important voice in this conversation around how do we address childcare in a way that's going to actually work for small businesses, for shift workers, for non-traditional hours, right? These people that have been left out of the conversation. We always look for opportunities to expand and advance Texas ProStart. And then also as the foundation does more and more on second chance hiring, kids coming out of foster care. I don't know that we'll have a bill on those things, but we'll certainly be looking for what initiatives can we support that will help advance those causes. And then my last sort of theme that I've, been playing with is this idea of improving restaurant resiliency. And I think Hurricane Beryl and the May derecho really drove that point home, but it's not just in the coast, right? We've got extreme heat all across the state. We've got tornadoes seeming to hit East Texas on a regular basis. And so it's just becoming clear that we need to be thinking about these issues in a more proactive way so that restaurants have the resources they need to not only succeed, but stay successful when things happen. So looking at things like our utility system, can you get power? Is it affordable? Is it reliable? Janice Drucker, I don't know if she's on the call today, but she's passionate about this concept of bridge loans and making sure that when there's a disaster, there's a way for you to get the money you need just to make payroll, pay deductibles, right? Deal with those immediate expenses that can really knock you out before you even can file an insurance claim or get an SBA loan. Property tax relief is a evergreen issue we will continue to stay on top of. Insurance I mentioned earlier. So those are all kind of things that I'm thinking about in terms of the long-term sustainability and stability of our industry. And then in the survey, I can tell you y'all have had lots of other great ideas, and I certainly want to make sure those are under consideration as well. Again, not going to read through all of these, but I think it's important for y'all to see the universe of proposals and opportunities that are before us. So
Number 4 on that list, Kelsey, on the previous slide, you've got an ally in the Texas Distilled Spirits Association, I promise you.
thank you, Dan. So here's just a little bit of a summary slide. Obviously, I couldn't summarize it all on one slide without the font being so small you couldn't read it. But really, this is the give and take part of the conversation. What are we missing? And then also, just as important, what are we going to prioritize? Because y'all saw that was a monster list. We have to play defense on a lot of issues. And again, we have basically 70 working days that we're dealing with. So we have to be really strategic in what we identify as our priorities so that we have a real shot of getting those items across the finish line. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let y'all talk.
Kelsey, this is Mike. It seemed like at least from my perspective, your outline in terms of the most important things that we as members have contributed on the survey, if you will, are certainly a good pecking order, if you will. Have you and your team really identified which areas you want to address first, second, third, those kinds of things of these particular 4 priorities?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I think swipe fees is huge for me because of the potential money amount that we're talking about here, right? The impact that it would have, not only in terms of size, but that benefits every single type of restaurant, every type of allied member that we have, which is tricky, right? Sometimes our policies, maybe not everyone sells alcohol, so that doesn't help some folks. Not everyone relies on the tip credit, so that doesn't help some folks. Swipe fees is one that helps pretty much every single person in a big, meaningful way. So that to me makes that a big priority. That said, I want to be realistic and I want to be honest with y'all. We are probably not going to fundamentally change the credit card market in a year, right? That's a long-term fight. We're dealing with probably the best resourced industry as our opposition that you could possibly come up against. And they are going to spend as much money as they need to defend their position. So I don't know. I don't think that we will pass a swipe fee bill this session, but I think it's incredibly important that we move the ball forward on that issue, to go back to my sports analogies, and that we make a really strong effort. And part of that is because we have to educate people on this issue, right? A lot of lawmakers don't understand this issue. Y'all know consumers don't understand this issue. And so it's going to take time, and we need to start educating folks, and we need to start that today, is my opinion.
In that particular question about swipe fees, help me to understand perfectly. The state legislatures obviously could take action with some type of bill approval and the governor's signature. But in reality, for that to really be effective, wouldn't it have to be a congressional issue as well?
think so. Texas's economy is the seventh largest in the world. So if we were our own nation, we'd be seventh largest in the world. That gives us a unique opportunity to do something in this space. It also means the opposition is going to fight like heck to stop it because there's a lot of stake in it. But no, I think this is something we can impact at the state level. The state of Illinois just passed the very first bill to prohibit swipe fees on sales tax collection, which y'all know is what we worked on last session. Great win for Illinois. The banks and the credit card companies have sued to try to block that bill. They are arguing that it should be a federal issue, Mike, to your point. But of course they're going to argue that, right? So we have to play our game, they have to play theirs. And I think the important thing is that we keep attacking it, right? We attack it at the federal level, we attack it in Texas, all our other states attack it, and eventually something will crack and we'll have a big win here. Does that make sense? Any questions on all that?
Yeah, Kelsey, quick thing. Mike, thank you. Because I think Kelsey's last point is the most important, is that when we meet with our CEO colleagues across the country, part of our goal is to have everyone working this issue, right? To also sort of neutralize the amount of offense you can get from our opponent. But at the same time, one of the issues I would love your thought on is around insurance affordability. And so it feels like, just meeting with both my California and Texas colleagues, or California and Florida, it's a huge issue. And we're hearing from more and more members of insurance rates doubling, tripling, not being able to get coverage. Where are you all on this issue? Anyone have an example or concern in this area?
Well, since my screen is open, I'm not muted any longer at this point. I'll just tell you, we've closed the original restaurant and we're under construction for a new restaurant, which will be sometime this coming summer. But our agency is already telling me that those liability coverages, property casualty, so on and so forth, will most likely go up 2.5 times before we open again. Even if we'd have continued, in some cases, the insurance company wouldn't quote us, knowing that our fees, or if you will, or our costs were so low or managed so well. And so it from my perspective, it is and is becoming a real significant challenge. And just changing agents to go quote other companies is not really the issue. It's almost like changing your medication from one style to something else. It's still a problem, and it's becoming very much a problem. And I haven't felt it yet because we're in transition, but we will feel it.
Wow. Okay, that's a great example, Mike. Thank you.
I'll say too, that's another one where we aren't alone. Lots of other businesses you can imagine are facing a similar challenge. There's actually interim charges on this topic, which means the committees have been tasked with studying it and bringing recommendations forward. So we're certainly monitoring that and hopeful that there'll be some good recommendations on that front as well.
Yeah, let me follow up one more thing, Emily and Kelsey. Obviously we're dealing with a Houston property, and so the underwriters are very sensitive, obviously, about Houston because of the latest hurricane and other kinds of things that we've had. And so that may be more isolated to the Gulf Coast area than it is to other part of Texas. That I don't know. These other folks can respond to that.
Yeah,
I'm feeling it sort of collective, right? Not just the coast. You're right, Mike. There's a whole different situation, and the idea of the bridge loan funding in other areas, especially for those hard hit constantly areas, but we're hearing insurance cost in general. So that's a good one for us to keep. If anyone has anything specific they want to share, please, message Kelsey after, if you just want to have a private dialogue. But that's one that we're just getting a lot of noise on. So we'd love to hear the reality. Because if you're talking about increasing 2 times what you paid in insurance, especially for multi-units, that just gets you into an unaffordability category. What about permitting fees? Any specifics in this area? As Kelsey sort of laid out the general, we know we're getting a lot of feedback here, but on the duplication, the extraordinary cost of permits, anything stand out to you all that is a real major problem in that bucket? Nobody.
Well, once again, Emily, Houston's a unique animal, and the Houston mayor and the Houston, Harris County and the Fort Bend County, they all have their own animals, literally. And so we obviously have had challenges in Houston for the last 20 years. And we have so many multi-permit issues, meaning sign permits and candle permits and those types of things, with really poor support for those permit costs, meaning no one's checking those permits. No one really is doing the kinds of things they need to execute our building, our new permit, our construction permits, through all those kinds of permitting offices. And so knowing Houston's political position as it relates to state legislature and the governor, they're going to fight anything that the state legislature is going to do. And you both know that very clearly. It's just being an attack on them instead of what's best for us as business owners. And so we basically, I would say to you in Houston, yes to all of these things. But I know the challenge is going to be faced at legislature for that.
Yeah, the city of Houston basically killed the sound permit piece of our bill last session. So
Correct.
They're special and they're on my list. As a reminder, here's kind of some of the things we're looking at for that permit bill. Definitely want to close the loopholes that they've exploited from last session. But when you refuse to follow a bill I pass in one session, you can better believe that next session it's going to have even more things in it. So it's grown. Are other folks seeing duplicative permit? Here's your TABC permit fee, but then you also have to pay the county, you have to pay the city, that sort of thing. We're tracking the cities that are doing that. Yeah, Jessica said yes. Are there any kind of major things that you think we should be prioritizing that are not on this list? I think that's really important.
Kelsey, is there anything we can do at state legislation that will eventually affect federal regulations, such as like future immigrant working and everything that we kind of think of nationally? Is there anything locally, or I'm sorry, state level, that can be done?
I think on swipe fees, it moves the ball forward on swipe fees, as we talked about. Unfortunately, the immigration piece, the state of Texas is so antagonistic to some of the immigration conversations that we need to have. I'll just be frank. And so that's not really an opportunity, but that's why we partner with groups like forward.us. And we focus on that messaging at the federal level, because one, that's really where they can make an impact, but also that's where we have a somewhat receptive audience. It's still an uphill battle, but so I don't think there's a correlation on that issue. Some of the workforce issue, there is correlation, right? We work on ProStart, for example, at the state level and the federal level. Things we do in one place can benefit the other. I think the emergency preparedness stuff is another example where there is some crossover. So that's a good call out and something that we need to look at for sure. Anything else jumping out at y'all as this should be the #1 priority, for example?
I don't know if this is a state question or federal, but is there anything that's being talked about for restaurant closures and idle loans being repaid if closing? And if there's any influence on the state level as well with that?
There's really not, Jessica, and that really is purely a federal program. The state has moved on from COVID is the honest truth. Idle loans are certainly something we can continue to press at the federal level. We were glad to see that ERTC payments have finally started going out. I know that's a separate issue, but I think it's an example of the fact that at least with the feds, there's still a tiny window of opportunity to talk about some of these issues.
Well, and Kelsey, I would add, as we talk about just the federal piece, one thing to remember, especially like this is the state legislature agenda, but due to our size and scope and frankly, partnership with the National Association and all of our large chain partners, we have a lot of work next spring around negotiation of the tax tax pieces coming up in the next tax bill, right? So there's actually a lot of things that could impact you that we will work on with our federal delegation, with our partners at the NRA and our large chain partners that could be very meaningful, but they won't be, that will be almost running parallel to what we have to accomplish at the State House. Because we know that no taxes on tips that everyone keeps asking us about is a congressional matter. It would have to go through Congress. And in the meantime, Kelsey's done a great job of prioritizing that. Yes, if that's good for workers, but what are we doing to preserve the tax benefits that our restaurants and small business are, benefiting from today that are going to expire? How do we have that conversation? So realize that it's not on the agenda here because this is at the Texas State House, but we'll be very deeply involved in that conversation at the federal level as well.
Yeah, running parallel is exactly right. So we're going to have all of these fights at the state level. At the federal level, we'll continue to press on immigration and worker visas, on the tax bill that Emily mentioned is a huge opportunity, on issues like EIDL and ERTC. All of that work continues to happen, while we also do all the state stuff and all the local stuff, right? So yes, please know all that continues. And at the same time, our lawsuits continue as well. So fighting that overtime rule, winning on the 80-20-30 issue, all of that happens parallel. I like that phrasing.
Kelsey, I think prioritizing these four is difficult, probably for any of us and for you, but they're all great actions that we need TRA's help with, and in many cases NRA's help with. But I have to say, save restaurants money would be my first choice if it was me, specifically in swipe fees, credit card fees, maybe in permit fees. I know what Houston's going to charge me, and it's, when I look at the overall fees as it relates to swipe fees, credit card fees, those kinds of things, it's minimal compared to those credit card fees. As an example, I'll share with this group that once we closed the restaurant after the leases had ended, late part of last year, I went in and really analyzed all of those credit card transactions from the prior few years. And we all know, if you really study your merchant processing invoices or bills, you see we all have dozens of subcategory processors, if you will. Well, I had one that I discovered was there only to process certain American Express cards. And that was, of course, set up by my master merchant processor. Well, I discovered that I paid $1,894 in 2023 to that particular processor to process Amex credit cards, and they only processed one card for $84.
Wow.
And there's more of that happening than most of us realize, because we have a CPA or a bookkeeper that says, yeah, there were your fees. This is the total. We go, oh, hell, that's too high. And then we go back to running the business day to day. But if you go in and you dissect those, that's the kind of things that you provide. And you'll say, as an operator, how the hell is that person even handling my cards? And your merchant processor, the big one, will say, well, that was something we had to do to make sure you wouldn't get a non-processing decline or whatever the case may be. So it is so complicated. It's not just about how much they're charging us. It's about how that structure is. So that, to me, is probably one of the most important things that are here today.
And Mike, that's exactly why that transparency piece, I think, is so important. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I agree. Until you really understand what it is you're paying and can verify what you're paying, how in the world can you wrap your arms around this problem, right? So thank you.
So Kelsey, with a complicated issue like the one that Mike just brought up, what's the best way to make you aware of that?
Send me an email, text, call. Yeah. And I think on swipe fees in particular, we're working with our PR firm. Emily doesn't even know this yet. We're working with our PR firm on a communication and PR strategy around this proposal, because as I said, part of the goal is to pass legislation, but to do that, we're going to have to educate people. We're going to have to change hearts and minds. And so we're working with our PR firm around how do we frame this issue? How do we get ahead of this issue so that credit card companies don't successfully paint it as killing people's miles and points, which we've seen at the federal level very successfully, unfortunately. So how do we frame this issue? And one of the things I'm really interested in is how can we collect y'all's stories, y'all's examples to really paint the picture, because people have no idea what you're paying. And importantly, people have no idea what they're paying when it comes to higher prices because you have to pass those prices on to your consumer. So how do we lock arm in arm with the consumer and say, it's really big banks and credit card companies against everyone else who's paying these ridiculous fees? So Dan, to your point, I think there's going to be an effort to really collect those stories, have y'all tell those stories in a compelling way, and really use that as a key part of our campaign.
And
So
Kelsey, to Kelsey's point, last year we had Skeeter testify at the House committee, and he said, I sell barbecue. I paid $850,000 over this period of time in swipe fees, and this is what I could have done with that money. To the education point, they were shocked. The lawmakers had no idea. They had no idea that they had no negotiating power, and that small businesses were bearing this brunt and how it was impacting the consumer. So the stories are your stories, right? Which is, this is, if you actually go back to Mike's point and look at what you are paying collectively in swipe fees, if you don't have that number today, it is going to be shocking to you. And having you step up, even if we have that opportunity, which I think we will, Kelsey, to testify, having the stories to support it, to say, hey, I'm James Clark. I run this business in Galveston. Look at me. I'm a great person, great small business owner, poster child. This is what I had to pay, and I have no choice in what I'm paying. Those are the most important things that we can do.
Yeah, the numbers and also putting that in context, right? So Mark Davis Bailey, for example, he talks about how he pays more in credit card swipe fees than for health insurance for his employees, right? That's shocking. So putting in those comparisons really tells the story for us. Anyone else have thoughts on what should be a top priority? We've talked a lot about swipe fees.
Swipe fees and whatnot.
Okay.
And, it might be an opportunity to get some clarity from them on what they see as, because they might, well, they should value their partnership with us and be able to help out in that respect. I just think that any kind of other input other than just us as operators could be valuable.
Yes, great
Agreed.
point. It's going to be busy, y'all.
I know
Kelsey-
Madison had a thought. Madison, are you still on? You want to share that?
Yes, ma'am. Madison Gessner. I obviously work with TRA. One of the great member benefits is that when some of our members are having issues, I'll go work with local municipalities. And one of the things that I'm seeing in the smaller, less urban areas, some more of our rural areas, is a lack of transparency when changes are made. So health departments will make changes on hours of inspections, or they'll make changes to their processes and they won't tell anyone. And when I go back to them and say, hey, you're getting a lot of resistance from this because there's a communication breakdown, can we work on this? They're like, oh, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources. And I'm like, I understand that, but yeah, you wouldn't allow this business owner to not communicate with you. So it's something about looking at the way the municipalities are aligning their priorities. And I understand, like, we want to be safe, have these safe, meet the regulations, but if they don't communicate them, then how are you supposed to do it? So it's a breakdown in that relationship. And I think that we should require them to announce those changes, send emails, post it on their website, allow you the opportunity to become compliant.
Yep, I see David C. is shaking his head vigorously. I know that's been a
Love
challenge.
that.
And I think we have an opportunity there with our restaurant permit bill. I think that might be something that we can work on. I was actually on a call with the Department of State Health Services the other day, and they said that there are about 200 different health departments in Texas, essentially. So just trying to keep up with that is a huge challenge, right? Much less, to Madison's point, their hours of inspection, what they're looking for, what their checklist looks like. And then you get down to the individual inspectors and you get even more variety. So are others seeing that? I know David shook his head. I think I saw some others shaking heads. Mike gave a thumbs up. Yep. James.
Beaumont, Christina was saying, yep.
So just real quick too on that topic, the James again, what we're experiencing right now is that there's a high turnover of sanitation inspections or inspectors, and they're coming in so green and so unreasonable with their judgment on how we're operating, and they don't understand how their reports impact our businesses. I mean, I'm to the point where we had this rogue person come in, first time we've ever seen her. She wrote us up for the stupidest things that have been in place for like 12, 14, 15 years that have gone through a handful of other inspectors, and it wasn't an issue. So I'm to the point where I want to invite any of them in and give them a real world experience of what it's like operating in a restaurant. And I'm not saying, so it goes back to the spirit of the law and then the letter of the law. These people need to understand what these laws are intending to accomplish, but they need to be reasonable with how they are judging our business and their operations.
Yeah.
If we are, and we all are, focusing on the safety of our food and taking care of our guests, that should be the primary focus, not whether or not there's a light bulb out the moment they walk in, or the fact that, the hand washing soap happened to run out 10 minutes before they showed up, something stupid like that. It's ridiculous. And I feel like there's a way that we can help guide them in a better respect. And I know that's kind of off topic of what we're going on, but since somebody brought it up, I definitely feel like there's some opportunity there that would be a cost savings to our restaurants too.
And
James,
James,
you're absolutely, James,
oh.
you're absolutely, this is Mike, you're absolutely right. And I couldn't agree with you more, but I'll tell you what they should do and they can do. Either way, they can do whatever they want. And how we've been able to say not minimize that in the Houston market with the Houston Health Department is we've created these relationships with our board members or members of our association with those particular department heads to make ourselves available to assist them, that if there are issues that they're concerned with or non-compliant restaurateurs or groups, that we would help them by reaching out to our colleagues, sit on task force or things that they want to change, and make formal proposals to them to change the code when it's necessary, which in most communities, changing that health code means you got to get to their city council or whatever to get that code changed. So we, over the years, have developed those relationships. Some things we've won, some things we're still fighting all the time, but that's just something we've been able to do. But please understand, they shouldn't, but they will do exactly what you don't want them to do. And you have to find a way to work through that. And individual restaurants trying to appeal to them individually won't do it. It takes all of you collectively to do it in your community. That's my thought.
One of the things that we've looked at too, to that education piece, is Kelsey and I, there's a national, Texas-wide conference of the different health inspectors. So we are looking to partner with them to educate at a broader level and have the TRA come, because we're partners in safety, and educate them and start to really build a relationship collectively from the state office to allow you guys some cover at the local level. And so that's something we've put on our agenda. It's just trying to figure out the right person to kind of manage this for us. But I think that's a great place to start. And then offering tools and resources, and even putting a piece of our website where, when there are new inspectors, perhaps there's a training that we also can provide about the operations of a restaurant, right? So we can't get them where we want them to be, then let's kind of go to their space and be the education arm. And then in some cases offer for all the new restaurants that are kind of getting hit hard, maybe there's a discount on a TRA membership for that first year, so that health inspector sees us as their valued partner, and not an adversary, and provide cover for all the 200 inspectors and sort of restaurants across so that's on our, we're sort of going to flip the script on this because we're hearing this a lot.
Yep.
Wonderful idea. Hey, Kelsey, I'm somewhat removed from the financial payment systems and credit card fees and swipe fees. I've got a financial director who's fantastic. She's smart as a whip, so I don't have to get involved with that stuff. But could I give her this presentation to look at once you've got it recorded? Is it okay if I pass it along to her? I understand the confidentiality of it, and I'll stress it to her.
Yeah, of course. Your team member, especially your senior team members, are welcome to get the recording. Just ask them not to share beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
David, we're almost out of time, but real quick, want to go to you.
I'll make it quick. We tried to work with the health department here in Lubbock. We had a meeting, brought everybody in, and they are the biggest uncompromising group of people I've ever met in my life. Let me tell you what they did to me. So they came into one of our stores, 21 critical violations, just stupid stuff, made us replace the kitchen floor, $15,000, shut down for 3 days, total bill $30,000. They came in the following week on a Friday lunch and spent 4 hours in there and gave us another 21 critical violations. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm a good operator. Those violations were ridiculous. Just FYI.
Yeah,
I'm so mad about this. I could scream.
Yeah, and I've met that group with you, and yeah, go ahead and scream. Just put it on mute.
Yeah, we're with you, David. We really, I'm not laughing at that. I was laughing at Emily's comment, but yes, it's a real problem, and we know, and we're ready to help. Okay, just lastly, kind of wrap up items. If you have not taken our survey yet, or we've got a few folks on this call who are part of larger brands, have franchisees, et cetera, please, please, please share this survey out. It really is a very easy way to have a direct say in what we're going to prioritize this session. Even if folks aren't members, this is a great way to talk to them about membership and say, hey, the TRA actually really cares what you think as an operator, even if you're not a member yet. Take the survey, learn more about what we're doing, and eventually we hope you'll see the value and join us. So that's the QR code there. Tony also dropped it in the chat earlier. And again, thank you, Tony and team. And then lastly, action items. Please stay engaged. I mentioned membership and talking to prospective members. We can always do more when we have a larger group of people behind us. I can't stress that enough. The squeaky wheel gets the grease at the Texas Capitol. And so we need to be organized. We need to be on point with our messaging, but we need to be loud and we need to have a real presence so that we can get a lot accomplished. So please talk to folks in your community. If they're not members, let them know. Here are the things that the TRA is fighting for you. Please be a part of the effort. Please make sure you're signed up for the newsletter and get push alerts through the TRA app. Session happens very quickly. Things happen very quickly, and those app push alerts are one of the best ways that you can stay notified of what's going on in real time. Tony and team, if y'all could drop those links in the chat, that would be great. And then coming soon, we are going to have a kind of campaign for y'all to help spread the word and ask your peers to support our advocacy efforts. Many of the folks on this call are already donating. Thank you so much. Help us grow that donation pool so that we don't have to rely so much on you and we can grow that base. So we're going to have some graphics, we're going to have some messaging, and really the message is I support this work because it's important. You should too, right? So it's communicating a little bit of that peer pressure, frankly, to say more people should be supporting this work and be involved in this process. Please reach out to me. You'll know I'm available anytime, text, email, call, whatever. Your feedback is important. You're never bothering me. So please continue to reach out. And then, of course, we have to have the QR code for our donation page, which makes all of this possible. We've got to pay some of the best lobbyists in the building. We have to have our lawyers ready to go when we file lawsuits like 80, 20, 30. And all of that takes resources. So thank you for playing a really critical part in making that happen. Anything else? We're right at time.
Great job, y'all. Thanks for including us.
Thank you all very much. Thank you,
and
Kelsey.
We'll have
Erica,
another
great
one of
work.
these in September. So if you missed part of it or you know someone who missed it, encourage them to sign up in September.
Great
work, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.